Hey everyone, I thought we'd revisit this video. I'm slightly changing the rules of this video to the original. Before, the idea was that all the characters were thrown into a room by the entity to see which one would be the last one standing. For this one, I want to give them all a chance to do a bit more. So I want to have the imaginary setting be Shelter Woods. All of them start around the central tree, and from there have to survive till the end. That's the premise, let's get into it. The first to fall is who we will tackle first, these being the characters who will likely be overwhelmed in the opening battle, who are a bit more erratic and will be less inclined to make a plan but simply rush in and hope for the best in a panic. On the flip side, most of the characters who are almost untouchable due to their varying things will definitely survive. For example, Sadako's ability to demanifest would seem like it's impossible to injure her. For stronger characters like Oni, his armor will surely be a huge part in his protection, just to give some examples. The first characters to fall would undoubtedly be Legion. Despite there being 4 of them, they're erratic and unprotected, and the closest to regular humans out of the roster. Trickster would quickly follow. I think he would manage a little longer than Legion, as he can pepper his blades about and keep people back, but would eventually run out as he has just 44. He has no protection really, and he moves slowly. Clown will be the next to fall, I think, with him being able to cause some slowdown surrounding him, but ultimately I think he would be one of the first to fall. He has little protection, he's slow, and his bottles will only save him for a short while. Bubba is a character similar to Clown, who would just kind of swing away in the initial outburst and fall pretty quickly too. I think he would just panic lots basically, go into kind of a tantrum mode, but eventually be taken down. Pig is another character that I think wouldn't make it far. She has little available to her aside her hidden blade. Nurse, Artist, and Plague are characters I'd like to group together, as I think they all have great strengths, but still have too many weaknesses to be able to last that long. Nurse has strength in her telekinesis, however if she moves at all, she has a huge fatigue state and has to flop down as if she's exhausted all her energy. I just don't see that being sustainable in a situation like this. She could maybe get away initially, but I think she would be caught out fairly quickly. Artist has the power of her crows and can damage and confuse others with them, and seems to have much of the entity's favor. However, she's otherwise unprotected, and her weapon at the end of the day is ink, so yeah. Plague is able to significantly weaken other characters with her vomit. However, after that she's really reduced to being fairly weak, with her only tool being her sensor, which isn't even meant to be a weapon. She could weaken a lot of characters though in the opening moments. Doctor I also think would go down pretty quickly. I think this for a different reason than most of the rest, and it's because I think he would get a little too into it, and end up being defeated early on. Billy is another character I think would too. Although he's strong and has a powerful weapon, we know from his lore he can get pretty angry, and even just wielding the chainsaw, he seems angry as he cries out. Eventually his chainsaw will overheat too, so I think he may cause some damage, but he would fall early on. Survive initially then fall is our next category. I think Skull Merchant would be able to survive the first wave pretty well. If she runs immediately, she can set up her drones and essentially just hide, being able to sense anything coming. Before long, I think one of the stronger characters would find her though, and from there, there's not much of a chance really. Deathslinger is a character with a lot of survival sense, and a background of defeating others with his bounty hunter days. However, those days are long gone. He's slower now, and is restricted by his leg brace. His weapon also isn't the best for a situation like this, with him only able to spear one person at a time. It's meant for bounty hunting at the end of the day. Twins would be characters to survive initially due to their years of knowledge on survival, particularly out in woods. They managed to go on for a long time without help really. I think they would manage to simply evade for a short while, keeping out of sight until they were eventually found, where then they don't really have the weaponry or the power to overwhelm many of the other characters. Hag, despite her small and rather unassuming stature, I think would do pretty well. As long as she managed to slip away and escape early on, she could set up an area and simply stay there, teleporting and slashing until eventually someone much more powerful triggered a trap, where then she would be in trouble. She could even just use the traps as alerts almost, and if one one is triggered, she just runs the other way instead. How long that would work for though is questionable. Ghostface I think would be another character able to evade for a long time, but his whole thing is targeting one person at a time, and in this situation I don't think he quite has the time to do that for everyone. He would maybe manage to take down some of the weaker characters, but ultimately he's a sneaky guy with a knife, so he's not going to last too long. Huntress would be another character to survive with a similar survival instinct and record to that of the twins. I think despite her lore saying she took down whole squadrons of soldiers and villages and stuff like that, in the trials she's restricted to 5 hatchets that she can only regain by going into a locker. I think it's pretty likely she manages well until Dredge leaps out when she goes for a hatchet. We are now at the halfway point with half left. Wraith is our first character here. I think as he doesn't seem like a particularly violent person unless provoked, he would begin by simply cloaking and moving away. I highly doubt anyone is going to find him while cloaked. The only way they can is by bumping into him as they move around, so I think he would last pretty long up until this half point mark. Trapper I could see moving away at the start, as he seems to be relatively tactical, deciding to instead find a corner or an area and setting up his traps so that no one could reach him. As his traps are able to hold people in place, I think this would be pretty effective too, until again, one of the stronger characters came along. Spirit is another character who would make it through till the end. It's unclear really whether she is supernatural, but she certainly seems it. I think her phasing paired with her weapon would make her hard to catch and allow her to deal some damage, likely just caught out by some of the stronger characters. I think as we struggle though with finding where she is as Survivor, the killers would probably have the same issue. Blight, despite his ability to inject many characters with his serum, likely isn't as strong as someone like Pyramid Head, and he's very much a mortal being who can be injured, which is evident just by looking at him and his body. That has been ruined from years of testing. He would be incredibly strong and difficult to catch, but eventually Talbot would fall. Oni would survive a long time I think, with his extensive training and how much he proved himself in his lore. He has armor, strong weapons, and is able to summon an otherworldly rage if he consumes blood, and there'll be plenty of that in this situation. Eventually Oni would likely be beat by either a supernatural character or another very strong character like Knight. I think if Oni and Knight were to clash, Knight would come out as the victor. Knight would be one of the final mortal characters to survive, and would make it to the very end I think. He's got armor, his ghost gang, and he's proven himself in his lore by doing things like taking down entire armies, so he would do very well against the majority of the roster until he found characters who would be untouchable by regular means, where he kind of hits a wall. The finalists will come down to the characters who are mostly untouchable from most weaponry. Really, the survivors are just going to be the ones that are immortal or supernatural in some form. There's not any way to get around that really. It's just the most likely outcome. Cenobite, Demogorgon, Nemesis, Executioner, Nightmare, Sadako, Wesker, and Dredge. This is where it gets interesting. For example, a character like Dredge could benefit a lot from being able to just consume all the other fallen characters to make itself more powerful. Dredge and Shape are referred to as being embodiments of evil itself, and are debatably the strongest of the characters. Every character kind of has their own immortality gimmick. Nemesis and Wesker, although not immortal, are incredibly powerful with their ability to mutate. They would be able to defeat every other character with ease, aside this group I think. Even with Ari's characters barraging them with bullets, they can't be brought down without some special serum or an oversized railgun. Maybe someone like Blight could make a serum, given enough time. I think the only characters who could beat them would be Pyramid Head, Pinhead, and I guess Sadako, if she 7 dazed them. Eventually these two would likely fall at the hands of someone like Pyramid Head. The same goes for Demogorgon. It has impenetrable skin by regular means, but Pyramid Head comes along and I think there's not much chance after that. So I'm sorry Demodog. From here it's really anyone's guess, with them all being immortal in some way and able to do their own crazy thing. There's debatably an argument for any of them winning. Freddy could make them all dream stuff that terrifies them, although I don't see a character like Pyramid Head, who's more conceptual, actually being susceptible to this, so I think he's ruled out. Shape I think simply doesn't have the means. He may be untouchable from most regular means, and able to keep resurrecting himself, but what is he going to do after that with these finalists, other than just repeatedly take hits? All he has is a kitchen knife at the end of the day. Eventually he would be overwhelmed and likely fall. I think reasonably the final three and the strongest in the roster comes down to Pyramid Head, Pinhead, and Sadako. I actually think although Pyramid Head is usually the go-to as a character who's unbelievably strong and essentially a conceptual being of punishment, he can still be physically moved to different places and areas, and I think likely defeated. It depends whether we interpret his presence as him being there to dispense punishment onto the characters of the realm, because in that case he probably could overwhelm the other two. Sadako seems to be untouchable and can also make anything simply die by showing them a tape and chilling for a week in her well. Pinhead is able to teleport anything out of the realm at will, summon and bind people with chains, and he debatably has the labyrinth and its powers on his side, as he's able to send people there, shown during his Mori. So who would be the winner of this all? My conclusion is going to be a little different this time round. I think I'm going to say Cenobite, able to simply teleport every other character out of the realm and into the labyrinth. If he has the box, he's pretty much unstoppable. I want to also give another option to the ending of this video, which I kind of prefer, which is that Sadako manages to project her tape onto all TVs on the map and eventually manages to get all the characters to see it. Where she then demanifests and evades everyone for the duration of 7 days, and then they all drop. However, the true winner here is likely Dredge. I just don't see how you can defeat essentially a fog, I guess a vacuum cleaner? Otherwise Dredge might be able to simply exist whilst this all goes down and absorb whatever is left. It's the embodiment of evil and totally has the means, it seems, to do this. Just absorb everything basically. Alright, well that's gonna do it. I do hope you enjoyed, and let me know what you think the outcome would be down below. Thanks, and goodbye.